So now for the sixth lecture, I wanted to speak about like the rest of the thing we can the basic methods we can use with a hidden Markov model. So the first question we want to address is how can we reconstruct the most likely hidden states sequence, so a path of hidden states given our observation, and you do that usually with what is called the Viterbi algorithm for hidden Markov models. I wanted to then we'll move on parameter estimation. I mean, relatively fast, in a fast way, because it's kind of an extension of what we saw with EM for mixture. So we'll just sketch the quantities we need to compute and how we run the EM, but we'll not get too much into the detail. And then I wanted to give a few examples of hidden Markov models in biology, because that's the we are in digital health, and that's also a domain for the analysis of biological sequences where hidden Markov model were really successful. So I just here is just a little recap on the definition of a hidden Markov model. We have a Markov chain on the states sequence ST, and we have observation YT, which are conditional on the states, and given by a list of emission distribution EU, depends on the state. Okay. And we will we'll see the example again on our casino example with a fair and a loaded dice. So we just saw before what are the questions with HMM. And now the question we will look at first is about decoding. And so that was just a recap on the forward algorithm. So as I said, the forward algorithm is allowing us to compute the probability of observing the sequence up to position t, so the y from the observation from 1 to t, and to land on a state v. Sorry, I made again a typo here. Okay. And then so they are like, so if you have a sequential process that you're looking at where you want to make inferences, so where you have latent variables, here it's our hidden Markov model, but we could think about any type of hidden signal we want to reconstruct. There are like typical quantities we compute, and this was just a little summary of what we like to compute. So the quantity here I mentioned about filtering is the probability. So what if I want to denoise my signal? I get my sequence online. So I observe data with time points, and I just want to predict now what is the hidden states, the possible hidden state at this position. And you can see that that's the posterior of the hidden states. But this is proportional to our forward variable, because here it's conditional on the sequence up to sequence t. So if we compute that for all possible hidden states, we can just renormalize the FU of t, and we get the posterior at position t, given the t first observation. Okay, so we can obtain that with forward. Another question that people can ask is a question of prediction. So I observe the sequence up to t, and now can I predict in each step, so in 2, 3, 4 time points, what will happen in the future, given what I observe now? And I guess so. How would you do that? If you have an idea, is it complicated to compute this thing? Do you think? Hello? Is it internet or?
No.
So yeah,
I heard you.
So let's imagine. So now we know we can compute easily with a forward. We can compute the posterior of being in any of possible hidden states at a position. But let's imagine we take something like a typical other example of sequential data. You have stock values. You model that with a Markov chain. and you think like maybe the stock will change according to some hidden property. So can we predict how the stock would change in 2-3 days, given what we already learned from the past? So I mean, in our model, it's relatively easy because we have all the possible hidden state probabilities at position t posterior, and then to move of each step, we just need to apply our Markov chain to the power of h. So that's how you can do prediction. So that's relatively simple. Okay, and that's a question. But that's a question that we will not see exactly with biological sequences, but at least we will. That kind of comes up easily if you're looking at sequential data. Another way of like denoise your data or making inference is what you can call fixed lat smoothing. That means that you're not predicting for the sequence you just observed. You allow yourself to see a little what are the observations which occur in the future, and you want to make a prediction L time step before. So you see, you can use a little of information of the observation that followed to make your choice. Okay, and then there is a last, the most extreme fixed lat smoothing. So that's called smoothing in general, simply smoothing. We will see about that shortly. You see, this is just the marginal posterior probability of, let's say, inferring the possible hidden states at position t given the whole sequence. So what is the probability here that my dice is loaded? But it's not a reconstruction. It's just the probability that, for instance, the t throws of the dice is loaded, given all the sequence of observation I got. So given all the possible combination of loaded fair dice I could have had in the other annotation. Okay, and so that's just like basic quantities I wanted to mention. So now let's go to our problem of decoding. So what is the most probable hidden state allocation? And to do the decoding, we will use an algorithm which is called the Viterbi algorithm, and it works in ways which are similar to the forward algorithm. With the forward algorithm, we did, you see, we did some products. So we do products of probabilities and we sum them. Here we do a max product. So we need to take the maximum allocation over a value that we compute. So we will have to introduce recurrence variable or recursion variable. So recurrence variables that allows us to transfer the max sequence from a sequence of length t to a sequence of length t plus 1. So we'll in the same way as we did for the forward algorithm, we will say we'll keep up the maximum probability. What is the maximal probability of observing the sequence y1 to t, landing on hidden state u, and it's maxed over all possible hidden states from 1 to t minus 1. So it's the best path up to position t, best in terms of probability, given that we arrive on the state u. And you see, in the same way as we computed the probability, like arriving on the state, we will be able to express this best path up to position t as a function of the possible best path up to position t minus 1. And that will give us a recurrence. But so when we compute this max, we can, when we move on with those variables, we'll just arrive with the maximum probability with that, because we just have a probability. So to be able to use this kind of path we made the path sequentially, we need to keep backward pointers for each of the states, so we need backward pointers to the state which got us to this max. So that's the explanation for those values fees. So it means it's the phi v of t's. We take the states at position t minus 1, which allowed us to arrive with the maximum probability at position t. So, okay. And so how does the Viterbi work now? So we need to understand a little how this value, you see, like the maximum over the probabilities of the best path up to position T and landing on state U. This will be simply the probability, that will be the probability of generating YT, so the observation at T, multiplied by all the possible hidden state I have at position T minus 1, multiplied by the transition probability. Okay, so how do we write that? I've wrote that directly the algorithm this time. So how do we write that in the Viterbi? So we need to initialize our, so this time I did it a little more formally. So we need to initialize our delta variable. So at position 1, the best path, the best score, we know where we land. So that's just the probability of starting with state U. So that's the initial probability on the Markov chains times the emission probability. And then the recursion for our best score, so the best score landing on state V at position T. To have a base score, that means that at position T minus 1, I landed at some state U, and I move from U to V with this transition probability. So this base score, this will be the max of all possible transition that I had from the previous states, times I need also to compute the probability of emitting the letter, so the emission of YT in state V at position T. Okay, and here it's my I keep my backward pointer, so that's for backtracking. I keep the information of which one of those U allowed me to get the max. So because we'll need that to get back. So that's the end of the algorithm. So that's how you work. First, you terminate your algorithm. So you compute the max values at the last position. I did a little typo here. So at capital T, position capital T. And then I backtrack. So I take, at last position, I take the last state is the value which had the max score. And then I go back each time. I can go back to the best state at the previous position by using this backward pointer psi. Okay, so it looks a little complicated when you look at the formula. Let's look on a simple example I took in the Murphy, because it was a little, I thought it was a relatively simple model, and we can go through relatively easily. So I recall here the recursion formula because maybe we need that. And this is the hidden Markov model we have. So we have three. It's for some kind of speech recognition. You want to define which type of state given a type of constants. You see you have all those possible observations. You have 7 possible observations. And those are constants, and you want to reconstruct the hidden states from that. And you see that those states, the problem is a clear problem that you can tackle in some way with Markov chain, because they have state 1 and state 2 state 1 versus state 2 and state 3, they have very different use of their observation. So that's the Markov chain, except of state 3. So the hidden Markov model already takes into account the fact that they use completely different, they have completely different observation probabilities. And it's also a way to take into account the fact that sometimes you can have this C4 in the state S3. And so that's the hidden Markov model and the observation. And now let's imagine you observe the sequence C1, C3, C4, C6. Okay, so how does that work? The same way as for the forward, you can keep your probability, your max probability of a sequence, given that you land on state 1, state 2, or state 3. So you have this matrix again of a max probar. So position 1, position 2, position 3, position 4. Position 1, you observe C1, so there is a probability of 0 to observe C1 from state 2 and state 3, so it's already at 0. And you have a probability of 0.5 to observe C1. Okay? And now you can use your the Viterbi algorithm to start to fill in this matrix and taking the max at each time. So what he made to help the computation is that he wrote on each arrow that the transition probability you see from S1 to S1 is 0.3. For S1 to S2 is 0.7. And then you have the emission probability next to it. So you see if you have a C3, C3 in S2, it's 0.0. There is a typo, I didn't check. Or maybe I made a typo here, it's C2. No, it has to be C3. So there is a typo here, it should be 0.2. Okay, it's this is the probability of observing the value. Okay, so you can move. So you can update the probability here. In theory, S1, I would take the max for S1 among S1, S2, S3. But here, those ones are 0. So there is only one possible value. It's 0.5 times 0.3 times 0.3. So times 0.9. So that's this value. Okay. So I'm sorry, I'm a little bothered about that. But let's move on, and check how it works. We do the same to go to S2. And from S2, we fill in. We multiply S2, we can only come from S1 again. So it's the probability of going from S1 to S2, 0.7. And then the times the probability to observe C2, C3, given that we are in S2, it's 0.2. So this one is correct. And we have 0.07. Okay. So now we can continue to fill in the other value. Let's look at this one. So for S2, at position 3, I can either come from S1, S2, or S3. S3 as from the max, where I arrive on S1, S2, and S3. S3 has probability 0. So I compare, either I came from S2, I had 0.07 times 0.9, probability of staying in S2, times 0.7, probability of observing C4 given that I'm in S2. No, but okay. Compared with the other probability of going from being in S1, 0.045, times probability of going from S1 to S2, 0.7 times the probability to observe C4 given that I am in S2, which is 0.7. So I thought this was there was a problem, but I made no, but there is a problem here. Anyway, okay, and so you can compare both. And what the red path is telling us is that the max was attained by this transition from S2 to S2, and the max at probability 0.0441. Okay, and so you continue to fill in the matrix for the third position, for the fourth position, and there is only one state here, S3, which has a probability superior to 0, so that's the max over all the states. So we know that here the states that we allocate with viterbi for the last path is S3, and then from S3 we go back from the max we made with the psi value, and we decide which one of the hidden states before allowed us to arrive to this max. So you see here the probability before was much lower, so we came from here we came from here, and here we came from here. And so we backtrack. Once we arrive at the end, we backtrack the set of states which allowed us to attain this maximum value. Okay, and so we see that the hidden state sequence is S1, S2, S2, S3. Okay, so if you're not used to this type of algorithm, that's a little, that's a lot in first time. So I don't expect you to be completely confident with that. If you did some sequence, biological sequence alignment at some point, you should recognize the way this algorithm works, because that's also what you do when you compute the best sequence, the alignment which have the highest score. Okay.
But so, the backtracking is just there to basically know which states you were in, right? So we could just also, while computing this, just output the states.
No, in fact not, because you don't know. You know, when you're here, you have a certain max. So your backtracking is conditional on the. You need to follow the path which led you to the max at the end of a sequence. Because you cannot take the max here per column. That will not work. It's not the same, because it's you know, like the state they combine. It's the max. It's a max over a product, but you never know that here maybe once you did all those sequence, your best state allocation is this one, but that's not necessarily compatible with the state allocation you made at the next step because of the constraint of the Markov chain. And also, you can just have a run of some observation which will change the allocation. So you really need to do this backtracking. I think we will need maybe one other example to go through another example to see that more clearly. Okay. So, I mean, to train, you can do that on the casino example. So that's one exercise for next week. You can compute, try to apply the viterbi algorithm for the sequence 6623. And so what you will do, you don't have to do like that. You can just construct, I mean, you can do like with a little, like a path with some graph, but you can also fill in this kind of matrix of the delta and the psi. Okay, but I think that's a good exercise to compute the hidden state sequence for this set, for instance. And it's a very, as I said, it's a classical dynamic programming problem. For instance, sequence alignment. If you did that, did you do sequence alignment at some point? Julian or Emmanuel, or it's not this was
No.
not part of your curriculum? Okay. So then if you don't know, then you don't know. So we saw how we can reconstruct the most likely hidden state sequence with a Viterbi. Now let's see how we can estimate the parameter of a hidden Markov model and a little of the EM algorithm. So you remember, if we have a Markov chain, to estimate the transition from A to B, we just count the number of time we observe A followed by B, and we normalize. That's the maximum likelihood estimator. We normalize by the number of time we observed A followed by something. And if we think a little, I will not kind of demonstrate that. If we have a hidden Markov model where the states are annotated, so where we know the states, we can decouple the hidden the Markov chain on the hidden states. We know, so we can just estimate our alpha by doing that, by counting the number of transitions from U to V. And then for the observed, for the emission probability, the emission of, let's say, observation A, given that we are in state U, we'll just count the number of times we have A when we were in state U, divided by the total number of states that we allocated as U. Okay, so I think that's relatively. We segment the sequence according to the hidden states, and then we do a traditional maximum likelihood estimate. But so how to do if we don't know the hidden states? How can we estimate the parameter? And so we will do a variation on EM, on the EM algorithm. And you see, remember, with EM, we generate this sequence of parameters until convergence. And what we do with EM is that we construct posterior probability for all the hidden variables. But we cannot here, let's say, compute the posterior probability for the whole sequence of hidden states. Rather, we will compute the posterior probability to be in state U at each position in the sequence, given our observed sequence. And that's the quantity we will use. So you see, we'll have like that. For each position in a sequence, we have our Q values, which will allow us to reweight the observation according to their possible states U. And in the same way, we'll need also, for the Markov chain, we'll need to compute the joint probability of having the posterior probability of having state U followed by state V at position from T to T plus 1. I will not go into detail for that, because that's just an extension of the first one. And then when we compute the M step, we need to maximize the conditional likelihood. And you see, it's also an extension. I mean, intuitively, it's an extension of what we saw with the mixture model. At the MEF iteration, we want to compute the emission probability for observation A, given that we are in state U. So what we do, we will sum over the whole sequence all the times we observed an A, and we reweight that by our posterior probability, or Q value that we know we already use for the EM in the case of mixture. So I think that's exactly the same intuition, and we renormalize by the total number of Qs. And for the transition on the Markov chain, we will do the same way. So, but what do we need to be able to run? So now we sketch what is needed for EM. It's roughly the same as before, as the general EM, just that we have specific Q values which take into account the Markov chain structure of our hidden states. But so we need to compute still the posterior, the probability of having a hidden state at position T given the whole sequence. And you remember, we call that a smoothing probability. So how can we compute that? So to compute that, we need to we will use again the very strong properties of conditional independence, which come from a Markov chain. But we used until now, we just use that in a forward manner, like for the forward algorithm. But if you see somehow, when you see the sequence, we go from S1 to S2 to ST-1, ST+1. We have a sequence of hidden states. So you remember the arrows say that how the dependency work. So we have a Markov chain on the hidden variables, and then the observation. Just follow given the hidden variables. So what we have to understand when we see this graph is that in fact, if I fix the value of ST, if I say, okay, my hidden variable at position T has value U, I completely divide my timeline into past and future. And in this case, like the past is independent from the future because of the Markov chain, because I fixed this value. And this is what we can use to compute the posterior probability, in the sense that, okay, we don't, as usual, we don't compute the posterior directly. We first start from the joint because it's easier to manipulate. And if we write the joint, we can divide the observation into the future of observation and the past, let's say the past observation up to where we are. And as I said, because of the Markov chain property on the ST, so we have this our forward variable, but because of the Markov chain property, the future only depends on the hidden state we have at this position T. And so like that, at each position, we can cut our evaluation of the posterior into past and future. And so we had a forward variable. It is the probability of it's the filtering, so the probability of the future of the present, the annotation from the present for the present given the past. But we can also define here a backward variable. It's the probability of the future sequence given that we are at hidden position U. Okay. And we call that B for a backward variable. And you see that now. So first, now what will give me the posterior probability is just this forward variable times this backward variable. And we can, the same way, this backward variable, if we think a little about our conditioning, it's a little, it's a good exercise. You can write a recurrence formula, but which is to the future, so that will allow us to go backward on the sequence. So we'll start from the end and go back, where we can say that the probability of a sequence given I'm on state U at position T is the same as saying, okay, I move from U to V, I observe YT+1, and I have again my recurrent variable. So you just go forward, and that gives you your recurrence on the backward variable. And so you see with this recurrence formula, we can again fill in a matrix of of backward values. Okay, and so the Baum-Welch algorithm, which is the name for the EM applied to hidden Markov models, at each step we need to compute the posterior. Sorry, we need to compute the posterior at each position. So we go first one run forward. We compute the forward values with our recurrence formula. Then we go backward. We compute our backward values with a recurrent formula. And then at each position, we multiply forward by backward, and we can compute a posterior. The complexity is again of number of states times length of the sequence. And we can do, so we can run EM. So we can use our maximal our maximization to update the parameters, and that works quite fine. I mean, if the model is structured enough, and we have our posterior probabilities to get an annotation of the sequence. So we can do what we call smoothing, which you see is different. So for each position, I represent it for the dice case. It's not like the Viterbi. For each position is the probability that we have a fair dice. But it's a probability which is given by position. And it's integrated over all the other hidden states in the sequence. In the case of the Viterbi, we extracted the path which had the highest probability. And it's not the same. You know, the path is more constrained. You could have many paths which have relatively almost the same probability, which is low, because of like indetermination in some part of the reconstruction. Okay, and you see here, I mean, the posterior also gives some, if I would cut at 0.5, I would get also, I will get another annotation of a sequence where there is no, I mean, it's not correct from the hidden Markov model structure point of view, but it's also a way. Okay. So that's roughly, we went over it a little fast, but that's all the tool we'll need for the hidden Markov model. And I wanted to show maybe 2 examples of the HMM in biology fast, if you have 5 minutes, if it's okay with you. Okay, Julian also?
Yeah.
Okay, so I just wanted to give 2 examples of HMM in biology. I have 3, but I will just start here with what we call transcription factor binding site. So it's one of the main problem. This is one of the other problem of annotation from a DNA sequence that we faced and we still face a lot when we looked at genome. You know, to activate the expression of a gene, to activate transcription, you have fixation of protein, which is transcription factor, which will bind to the DNA and recruit the the RNA polymerase to start transcription. And so those here it's the 3D structure you can see of FO4P. It's a transcription factor in yeast. You see it's a dimer, and it binds really to the DNA. And because of the physicochemical equilibrium, there is a preference for a certain nucleotide, certain sequence on the position where it's binding. And here, this is what you can see from, and you can see that when you start to look to do experiment, and you get the sequence by immunoprecipitation, you get the sequence of DNA which was bound to the transcription factor on genes which are activated by this transcription factor. And so you have like those binding sites. So there's a binding site from the transcription factor, and you can see here if you generate a consensus, there is like a preference at each position. It's position dependent, and there is a preference for certain letter. And so a way to represent that, and we saw that fast in the beginning with Multinui, you can represent those models by position weight matrices. And that's really a model which is very common in biological sequence analysis. It just tells you for each position, you have a probability to get each letter. I mean, you can renormalize by the background and stuff, but that's roughly what you get. So it doesn't have to do anything to do with this one, but here you see we would have 7 positions, and some position 3 and 4, it's almost always G and T. And here you have like 20% of T on position 1. And that's a model that then allows you to scan sequences and ask, so is there maybe a transcription factor, a binding site at this position given the sequence? Of course, the problem is complicated because as you can see, the motifs are quite short. They can be really degenerate, so there can be a lot of uncertainty in the position, and DNA sequences are quite long. But I just wanted to show that somehow that's a model where people worked with that by computing the probability of a stretch of sequence with this model, and then computing the probability with background sequence, and doing some log ratio of probabilities. But you can also directly rewrite this position weight matrix as a hidden Markov model. So your observation, here our observations are ACGT, and each of the column of our hidden Markov model is one of the column we saw just before for our position weight matrix, and they emit letter with certain differences. And then we can add over hidden states. So one state which will say, okay, it's everything which is not the transcription factor binding site that I want to get. And so we call that background, and that's just the nucleotide frequency of the portion of genome we are looking at. And so we can in a very simple way, you derive, let's say, you kind of rewrite something which is more general than those matrices. So I just wanted to show a little how it works with gene prediction. This is what you will do for the project in prokaryote. So just a reminder, a gene, it's a sequence between a start and a stop codon, okay, with no stop codon in between. And the start is usually ATG, but so there can be a change on the A. And the stop are always TAA, TAG, and TGA. So that means that somehow, to have a gene, it's impossible to have a stop within the gene in this frame, and you have codons, and it will start with ATG. So how can we write that with a simple HMM? So if we just want to write the simple model, a simple model to do this gene detection, let's imagine we just have one strand. So we just look at sequences where we go from 5' to 3'. From 5' to 3'. So we always have ATG on the forward. We will always have ATG, and then we go into the gene. Okay, so that's the Markov chain for the hidden state. And here I have, each time I have a state. Here I have a state which almost only emit A. Then I have a state which almost only emit T. Another state which almost only emit G. And then I start my gene where there is the genetic code. So I always go by groups of 3. So I do codons, which are frame 1, frame 2, frame 3. And so I always move like that from frame 1 to frame 2, frame 2 to frame 3, and back to frame 1. And the only way to finish, so within my codon, I cannot have a stop codon. So the proportion here, the proportion of letter of ACGT, they will reflect that and reflect the fact that I don't, I have some amino acids and some codon which are more favored than the other one. And then, so when I finished, I do my frame 1, frame 2, frame 3. I can finish the gene, and this has to be necessarily either TAA, TAG, or TGA. Yeah, okay, I didn't make a mistake. Okay, good. And so here you see that's also I do a state in the Markov chain, and they can only emit one letter. And if I go out of my gene, I'm back in the intergenic. And that's here, that's just the letter frequency I have if I don't have this gene structure. And you see, just by specifying the hidden Markov model like that, we capture the fact that there is particular letter frequency on the codon, and the very strong constraint, which are related to the end of the gene with the stop and the start of the gene. So basically, because the Markov chain is also an automaton, it will search for regions which have a good nucleotide composition from a stop codon, and then choose the best ATG from that. So then, I mean, that's the first model, but I don't know, I guess but like DNA is it's a double helix, so you can read the gene on the forward strand or on the reverse strand. So you need to take that into account. So in fact, you need to increase a little the model to put, we have a forward, ATG, and then the codon, and then the stop. But we also need to tell the HMM how it should find a gene on the reverse strand. And so that's like that. So if you're on the reverse strand, you first go into the stop, then you have the CDS on the negative strand, and then you go to the start. But then you can also when you start to get a little more into the biology of it, it gets a little more complicated. It's like our monopoly example, because sometimes you can have an overlap between the start of a gene and the end of the other one. And that's what you get here with those additional red link. So what people propose. And you can also integrate the fact that you know that in the beginning of a sequence, there can be some sequence with a particular composition, like here, a ribosome binding sequence, which is responsible of the binding of a ribosome, but that's a clue you can use to help decide which start is the best. Here it's half of a model. Okay, and so you can go to either more complicated model, and that's what people propose here with GeneScan, for instance, where you have eukaryotic genes, because in eukaryotic genes you have exon and introns, and so you also need to find intronic regions into the signal. Okay, and you get, so this is the picture I showed before. With that, you can get a gene annotation, which can be either a Viterbi path, but here it's the probability, it's the posterior probability of being on the forward or on the reverse strand, or in intergenic. It's a combined probability for those three possible annotation in the sequence. So, but this is what we will do with a gene model. Okay, so I had other example, but I think we can stop here.